it's very time-staking, and it's very arduous, and there are some personalities that are better suited for it than others.
Right.
And it seems to me that the self-inquiry approach of who am I, and or who is that who is witnessing what is going on, is a more direct approach and a quicker approach.
It is a quicker and much more direct approach.
But the similarity is that they end up in the same place.
Well,
and they're sort of flip sides of the same coin.
They are flip sides, and of course I often start, that's where I often have people enter, is start with just who's seeing, who's looking, who's feeling, who's hearing. What is it that sees as we sit here together? What sees? Just draw your attention to the seeing, and you'll start to see that there's not something that's seen. There's just the seeing. There's not a seer, there's just the seeing.
The seeing going on.
The seeing. And the identity can spontaneously let go of itself at any point in there. The deconstruction part of it is most people who even have a realization or an awakening, they suddenly realize, oh, I'm not me, I'm the seeing. I'm the awarenessing, or I'm the consciousness of whatever's happening. That even in that person, almost always, there's still a tremendous amount of beliefs and ideas that are still functioning. Some of the major ones are no longer functioning, but there's still usually a lot that's functioning that makes it difficult for what has been realized or awakened to actually be able to manifest it and express it through a human being, through a human personality, in the way that we relate, in the way we move through the world, in what we do. And what gets in the way of this is usually there is still a whole host of remaining ideas and beliefs, many of which are unconscious, that are actually getting in the way of this truth from functioning through all different levels of being.
Would you say that that's characteristic of what is often called enlightened ego? Or is that a different experience?
Well, it can lead to enlightened ego. One can wake up, in other words, in a very real sense and realize, let's say, I'm consciousness or I'm awareness. Have enough awakening for that. That's not the whole truth. But that's like going from the relative, I'm me, to the absolute, I'm nothing, or I'm consciousness, formless. And even when one does that to me, that's still not, that's enlightenment in one sense, but it's not enlightenment in a complete sense, because it's still in duality. I've just gone from the relative to the absolute, from form to formlessness. But the truth is that which includes both of these dualities, and yet transcends them, and yet is bigger than them. And if one does not get to that third thing, which is quite indescribable, then it's very possible that the ego gets in and realizes, oh, I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my feelings, I'm not my personality, I'm not my ego, and therefore, here's where the ego gets in, and therefore it doesn't really matter what I do, it really doesn't matter what I say, it really doesn't matter if I'm a self-destructive or a relatively unconscious human being, because none of that's ultimately real and it doesn't have anything to do with what I am. And you can hear, just when I speak it, you can just sort of smell like, that smells like ego to me. Right?
Yeah.
That's not, I mean, there's an element of truth in it, but one has exchanged relative truth for absolute truth. And it's not the whole truth.
I see.
And it's prone to ego, just like the relative truth is prone to ego.
You say that you woke up out of Zen.
Yeah.
After 14 or 15 years of Zen practice.
Yes.
So why are your retreats based on Zen style sessions with formless meditation, Kin-Hin walking meditation, and so forth? And you often quote Zen teachings. Is this just out of respect for your past? Or do you think that there's something about Zen that commends it over something more Western? Like Werner Erhard comes to mind as someone who sort of developed a purely Western teaching.
I really couldn't say why. It's not like I sit and have planned it out. I think it just comes from probably from the tradition I come from, Zen. I mean, when people come to see me, they usually very quickly figure out that I'm not in any way a traditional Zen teacher. I could care less whether somebody learns anything about Buddhism or anything about Zen. And it's why when I actually talk, usually I'm not quoting Zen teachers. Usually I'm not quoting any teachers. It gets in there here and there, but I think I tend to sort of liberally use other teachers from various traditions. Why the Zen stays in the name, when I do a satsang, I'll call it Zen satsang. But when I started to teach, I didn't know what a satsang was either, until somebody told me that that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, people seem to know what satsang is, so I guess we'll use that. That word's as good as any. And I think Zen's sort of as good as any word to describe. And I don't think that there's no such thing as reinventing the wheel.
You mean there's nothing new under the sun?
There's nothing new under the sun. Nah, there's nothing new under the sun. We may delude ourselves into think we're doing something new and special and unique, and yet, in one sense, where we're unique in the sense that every human being is a unique expression of the unmanifest. But at the same time, we're all using the same, assembling things when we speak from the same pot of words, from the same pot of concepts. Enlightenment is enlightenment is enlightenment is enlightenment, and if we start thinking that our enlightenment is basically different or better qualitatively than somebody else's, then we'll start to, delude ourselves into grandeur.
Yeah. Now, I was curious about that because there does seem to be, I understand the inclination to give credence to the tradition. It's almost like an honoring the tradition from which we came. However, sometimes, like a few minutes ago when we were talking about the possibility of instant enlightenment, it raises the question of why spend maybe 4 to 5 hours of meditation on a retreat per day, versus sitting around with you hitting us on the head with a stick saying, wake up,
Well, that would probably actually be much better time spent doing that, but, people would probably, throw lawsuits at me if I hit them on the head with a stick all the time.
Well, you could use a foam bat.
Yes. Really, Bob, the way I do retreats, regardless of what we call them or don't call them, they really show, I don't do anything that I do in a retreat or any part of my tradition in deference to Zen or anything else. Because the Zen is one way that the truth can be expressed. When people listen to me, they wouldn't know really that I had come from the tradition unless I tell them. Because I don't talk about the Four Noble Truths, I don't talk about the Eightfold Path, I don't spend a tremendous amount of time on ancient Zen teachers or koans or any of that kind of stuff. True, yeah. And yet all that was part of the influence that sort of becomes a part of the way I express things. I put things together, especially in retreats, because of what I have noticed works. I have noticed that to be quiet, to meditate in order to get from here to there, doesn't work very well. That's a real failure point in many spiritual systems. It's a failure point in Zen as well. That as soon as I start meditating to get from point A to point B, it's not the best thing I could do for myself in terms of waking up.
So that suggests that meditation should be a practice wherein there is no aim to get anywhere.
Exactly. And that becomes the aim.
Yeah, if you're not careful.
Now, that's why I like to separate meditation and what I do in satsang, which is the dialogue with students and teaching, is because in meditation, as you well know, what I always suggest is in a very simplistic way, is just sit down and let yourself be quiet. There's a little more instruction than that, but that's basically the the beginning and the end